18th, 2022, I call the meeting to order. And the first item of business, of course, is suspension of the rules. And so I would ask someone to move suspension of the rules to allow the committee members and staff to meet remotely during our COVID pandemic. Could I have a motion to that effect?
Madam Chair, I will second.
Okay, and I guess we take a roll call for that.
Yes. Monica Bobo,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Joanne Solomon,
Yes.
Jonathan Yusma,
Aye.
Chair Ravel,
Aye.
and Bobby Burns,
Aye.
All right.
and Devon Reed.
I think he's not here yet.
Not here yet.
Okay,
Okay.
motion passes.
Great. Okay, thank you. We have a new a new team member with us, Anna. Sarah, do you want to introduce
I
your
would love to introduce Anna. Anna joined us on December 20th. So
Oh, wow.
she has been with us not quite a month, and it's been a, month where a lot, we haven't had committee meetings and stuff like that, but I am so excited to introduce you. Anna is came to us from the village of Niles.
Mhm.
She's done all kinds of community development work. She staffed the Building and Zoning Commission and their Economic Development and Neighborhood Renewal Commission. So I really like that. So she's always been involved in areas that we're trying to invest in and always trying to improve things for people. She's done research and analysis of data. She was, her position there was management analyst. So fits right in, we need people with analytic skills and all that good stuff. And so she's done a lot of problem solving, data analysis, budgeting, all kinds of stuff. She's also done FOIA management and all the kinds of things that we always have to deal with. She was also, before that, she was at Elk Grove Village and doing similar kinds of work. But she's also got social services background. She worked on a community coordinated childcare program, specifically addressing language barriers for Spanish and other and people with other languages that were their first languages, not English. Anna herself is very accomplished in the languages she speaks. She not only knows Spanish and English, but also French and Portuguese. So we're just going to have her translating stuff left and right and we're just thrilled to have her on board. We always kind of, Anna and Marion will kind of go back and forth sometimes on assignments, but for starters, Anna is going to become our home investment partnership specialist. She's digging into TBRA. She's digging into how to do Davis-Bacon compliance on the Evergreen project, just all kinds of good stuff. And she's doing a great job at it. I haven't scared her off yet. So that's really, so I'm just really happy to have her here with us. And we may not always have all three of us at meetings. We may rotate and stuff like that, but I thought it was really important for all of you to meet Anna. And as I say, we're just delighted to have her on our team.
Yeah, great. Well, welcome, Anna, and we look forward to seeing you at many of our meetings. And I can just imagine how happy Sarah is to especially let you worry about, about a lot of those things that she just mentioned. So that's really great.
Thank you so much, Chair Ravel, and nice to meet you, everybody.
Okay.
I'm here to help if you ever need anything or have any questions.
Great. That's great. Okay, on to our business. And the next item on our agenda is approval of the minutes of our December 14th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes?
I move to.
To approve the minutes of our December 14th, 2021 meeting.
And is there a second?
Second.
Okay, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Monica Bobo,
I'll abstain because I was not at the last meeting.
Right.
Kathy Feingold, absent. Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Joanne Solomon,
Salome, rhymes with baloney.
Saloni,
Yeah, right. Yes, aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Yes, aye.
Councilmember Reed, is absent. Councilmember Nusma
Aye.
and Chair Ravel,
Aye.
motion passes.
Great, thank you all. And now on to the main items on our agenda. We have two items. And the first one is for the renewal of the contract for landlord-tenant services. And I know this seems strange that I keep having to basically ask somebody to make a motion, but technically the chair is not supposed to be making the motion. So I'm going to now ask if someone would, to get us started, if someone would make a motion for item 4A regarding recommending to City Council approval of the funding for the renewal contract for our landlord-tenant services. If
So moved.
Okay, and do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, so now we're, it's open for discussion and information from our staff and our guests, or how, Sarah, how would you like to?
So Anna is just going to give a brief overview,
Okay,
and then we've got both John and Mark Schwartz here. We have to admit Mark too. And then after we brief overview from Anna, then I'd like to just open it for questions from the committee.
Okay.
And we'll field them or punt to John and Mark, depending.
okay,
Okay, is everyone in the meeting?
I've promoted John and Mark to panelists, but I think Mark needed to just accept the invitation, and I believe he has now.
Mark's texted me to said that
No, I'm
his
here now.
button
I'm sorry.
disappeared.
I'm
Okay.
here.
there he is. Okay, I think we're all here.
All right. So the first item in the agenda is the approval of renewal contract for landlord tenant services with the Metropolitan Tenants Organization and the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. And this is for the January 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022 period. Staff recommends approval not to exceed $61,800. And I'll go into a little bit of the base scope of work. So it's $46,800, of which $36,800 is for MTO and $10,000 will be for the Lawyers Committee for Better Housing. We just want to make clear that MTO and the Lawyers Committee is a partnership. And this would be paid on a quarterly basis for operation of a free hotline for landlord and tenant inquiries, responding to landlord-tenant inquiries received through the city's 311 system, and the MTO hotline with an estimated call volume of 30 to 40 calls per month. And also working with the city to maintain a landlord-tenant information on the city's and MTO's websites, and also the coordination of 3 trainings. 2 trainings are for Evanston tenants and landlords, and one of them is working with the city's Property Standards Division rent program. And this is for Evanston landlords and or property managers. And there's also an additional services amount up to $15,000, which would be billed on a quarterly basis as incurred for possible mediation between landlords and tenants, and also tenant organizing and legal representation for low-income Evanston tenants to avoid displacement or evictions and illegal lockouts. We do have a report on page 10 of your packet, and it's showing right now on screen. This is the City of Evanston's tenant landlord services report. So these are all the calls that MTO has received. As you can see, the majority of the calls have been for eviction and maintenance and lease questions. And this has mainly to do with the COVID-19 trends and the end of the eviction moratorium. So you can see all of the changes when they happen is when there have been news of the moratorium ending. There's also a lot of calls being done for maintenance, that be number 2. And we are continuing to see a drop in those sort of calls and an influx of those types of eviction and lease issues questions. But the large majority of the calls are from tenants. And if you see from 2019 to 2020 and 2021, the call volume has been pretty much stable. There has not been much change, but we do see those top categories being lease eviction and maintenance. So if you have any questions, committee members, we're open to questions.
Lauren has a question.
Shock. Yeah, I was just wondering if you all had any demographic information on the people who call the hotline. I can imagine it's not easy to get. Maybe you don't have it. And I would presume it's primarily low-income tenants who are calling. But I would just be curious to know if you have any sense of what part of town they're calling from, or just any of that.
We did provide a map.
Right.
There it is.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Mhm.
Yeah, so in the heat map, you can see it's divided up by wards. So you can see in the heat map the number of calls per issues, and it's mostly in the center of going from north to south throughout the center of town.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm
And
sorry.
probably a little more south than north.
Mhm.
Right.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question all right, Lauren, or?
Yeah, I didn't understand sort of number of calls divided by issues. Like I didn't understand how to get, well, never mind. This is fine. Never mind.
Okay.
Lauren, sometimes people have multiple issues that they report at a single time, so they don't actually match up exactly. Does
Okay.
that make sense? And
Yeah.
I just wanted to point out that when you think about where those darker blue dots are, it kind of goes along the transit and where our multifamily tends to be in pretty large, in general.
Okay. Ugo, you have a question?
I have actually a couple of questions.
Sure.
And first of all, I'd like to commend your group MTO for the great work that you're doing with tenant representation. I think it's amazing. Part of my question is, it's amazing that you helped 491 people to avoid eviction over the past year. But my question is, in regards to that, is it 491 separate tenants, individual tenants, or is it 491 touches, meaning one person could have 3 or 4 touches, which is sort of what you were also saying, Sarah, about one same person might have multiple issues. So is the 491 really an eviction prevention for 491 different families, or is it 491 services that you provided? So that's my question number 1. And 2 is, on your report, you mentioned also by the way, I'm a licensed real estate broker, and maybe I'm a little bit more familiar with some of the terminology that you're using on your report. But you mentioned that you have you also oversee some of the real estate landlord-tenant ordinance in Chicago. And as many of you probably know, Evanston has adopted very much of that same ordinance for our city. And I see some serious issues with the residential landlord and tenant ordinance in Chicago. And it is that it kind of puts a lot of emphasis on kind of bringing the balance back to, or the pendulum more to the tenant side. And there is a lack of balance, for a lack of a better term from me, in terms of creating a balance of representing tenants and landlords equally, and not equally in the same way, but with equality in mind. There is a heavy burden on landlords on the security deposits issue. And I think that a lot of the emphasis has been given to that is very punitive to landlords. And on the other hand, we also miss some issues with tenants. I'm losing track of my train of thought here, but what I wanted to know is how involved are you with keeping that more dynamic and more up to date with today's days, with today real estate activity? I definitely see a lot of lack of for instance, if you think of a Section 8 or a voucher holder, those families go through a lot of issues to get an apartment and are rejected in many instances because of the bureaucracy that is behind a Section 8 voucher. And it's also punitive on landlords, because if a landlord is willing to take a Section 8, it takes sometimes a month and a half for them to get an approval on the Section 8. And I think that that's a heavy burden on tenants who are in the need of getting an apartment by the end of the month, and they can't find one because the process is very burdensome. And now with COVID, it has even been exacerbated by the lack of staff from the Section 8, from CHA. In the case of the city of Chicago, I don't really know who does it in Evanston, but it's very burdensome for the tenants to find an apartment that is suitable to them. And also they have, I forgot what the term is, it's like a mobility upgrade in an apartment. And when the inspector comes or the determination is made, it really doesn't match. The tenant is applying for a $2,000 apartment, and HUD or CHA comes back and said, we only pay $1,750. The landlord is not going to take $1,750 because they probably paid a super escalated price for their property. So it's very hard to match rents with the tenants that need that apartment. I think I'm talking too much, but
why don't we stop and start trying to get some answers to all of that?
Well, first off, on a monthly basis, they're individual tenants. Though, some people may call back like at different times of the month and all that, or different months or that. And we do not go back and track those again. So I don't want to say that that's completely different, but if somebody calls in a month that, we just count it all as the same call for that entire month. So that's, I hope that answers your first question. As for Section 8, well,
Don, do you want me to try to talk some of that about the housing authority?
You could try and talk, we would certainly agree that yes, there are problems from both sides and this, it would be good to, maybe figure out how to do that better. So go, Sarah.
Ugo, the Housing Authority of Cook County, it actually handles the vouchers for Evanston. And yes, there are some of the same challenges because of lack of staffing and things like that. But they certainly are trying to keep up. One of the things that I haven't heard as many problems, and Joanne may also be able to weigh in on this because she's also a realtor and a landlord. But the Housing Authority uses what are known as the small area rents. So it used to be all of the Chicago metropolitan area had the same rent levels that they could use. And when Evanston's rentals started going up and up and up in price, we were seeing our voucher holders going down and down and down because people couldn't afford it. So Chicago metro area was one of the test markets for these small area rents where the rents are determined by zip code. So in Evanston, the rent thresholds in zip code 60202 are different from 60201, but they are also significantly higher than what were the old fair market rents. And so that certainly kept some of the decline. It's still hard to get an apartment in Evanston now, and it's getting harder because of course we're having even more our rental rates are going up, but that's an ongoing challenge. But there is a different scale by zip code. So that's helped a great deal. I hope that's helpful.
And I mean, as a realtor, when people have asked me to help them find Section 8, it's just very difficult. And North Shore Board of Realtors, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, had the head of Housing Authority Cook County come. And, landlords under Cook County, they're supposed to accept the application. Now, they don't have to accept it. But there are still landlords who just say, no, I won't accept an application for a Section 8 tenant. And then, the head of Housing Authority said until a tenant or prospective tenant sues landlords, they're going to continue to get away with it. So, I mean, it really is difficult now. I just want to say, everybody, I'm going to have an apartment available March 1st, 4-bedroom, 2-bath. And I will accept Section 8, and I'm asking $2,300, and I'm hoping Section 8 will accept that. It is in 60201, so the level is higher, but they never start you out at the top. So, I'm just basing it on, it's like, that's like $300 less than the top, and everything. So anyway, so I will have that unit, but it is very difficult and it's very frustrating, but right now I'm rehabbing the whole place because my past tenant left it in a mess, but it needed to be updated too. But yeah, so it's frustrating for tenants and landlords.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the first questions that I get asked when we put an apartment for rent is, and it just blows my mind, because the first question is, do you accept Section 8? And it is mandated that you accept Section 8.
Yeah.
So so there is a lack of education also on the tenant side, because the potential tenants are still asking if the landlord takes Section 8. It's mandated. There is no questions on that. Maybe my building has, my apartments are full of lead and I have to disclose that, but I'm mandated to accept Section 8. So I think that there is a lot of work to be done yet on tenant issues. and maybe working on a collaborative with other organizations to create a little bit more balance. But that's just food for thought. I just wanted to make the note that a lot of tenants still ask if Section 8 is allowed, which is a shame in this day and age.
Thank you. Other questions from the committee about the work of MTO or the lawyers committee? Any?
I think it's a real bargain for what they're asking for all that they do.
Yeah, right.
What's the best way for residents to access these services? If I get a call from a constituent, shall I have them call 311?
That's probably the best way, or you could just give them our hotline number and we'll call them back.
Is
Which is
on our website?
It is, and I can share it with you as well.
Okay. So
In
if
the,
refer
in the
the
off chance, I just want to say in the off chance that, because Evanston doesn't have that many residents that are actually being summoned into eviction court, but for residents that are summoned to eviction court, Lawyers Committee for Better Housing is a member of the Early Resolution Program in eviction court, the Cook County, and we would like for folks from Evanston, if they definitely, everybody should just ask to participate in the ERP, and that will get you to legal aid, potentially rental assistance, mediation, and the like. And the case will be continued for a couple of weeks so that the tenant can get these resources. And because of our participation with Evanston, they can request us. It's not guaranteed that you get us because all of our attorneys are booked up. They'll be sent to one of the other ERP partners, but I will modestly say that we're the best, so try to get in with us. And then if we do end up taking it, most of the ERP is for brief advice and negotiation and all that, which if it's great if it can resolve that way. But we will be taking cases through extended representation. We're funded through the city of Chicago to do that. And we also consider this funding to allow us to do it for Evanston tenants.
Okay. This is, from my perspective, making referrals to constituents who reach out. This is one-stop shopping. I don't have to direct them. I don't have to assess what their situation is and direct them either to MTO or LCBH. I call that number and you guys figure out what they need.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay.
I just want to make a note that I should actually send out. There was a recent article in the New York Times about preventing eviction, and they talked specifically about this program that Mark was just describing. So we will get that sent out to all of you. It really, eviction prevention or just really helping people is really important because it isn't going to go away in the near future, unfortunately. But there are, I just want to also let the committee know, we had started last year, we were starting to look at updating our landlord-tenant ordinance because Cook County came out with a landlord-tenant ordinance for the for the rest of Cook County. We are exempt from it because we have our own landlord-tenant ordinance, as is Chicago and one other suburb that has its own. But we got kind of diverted from that. We have to get back to it. That was also one of the things that was referred to the subcommittee of the Planning and Development Committee. It was one of the items, but it is an important thing because there are some, Ugo, you mentioned security deposits. One of the things that Lawyers Committee for Better Housing and MTO helped on the Cook County ordinance. And one of the things, if I recall correctly, that they want to keep security deposits because it is an important tenant protection and also it's valuable to the landlord, but they got rid of that wretched little bit of interest that was so onerous and everybody had to spend, so much time and energy sending out tiny little checks or whatever they had to do. So, so there's been a lot of real thought put into things. We were also looking at what Chicago has, which is a graduated, maybe not going to quite the same scale. They had a graduated period of time for notifying tenants of non-renewal. the longer they had been there, then you had to give them a longer time notice. And we had a building that John has actually been working with to some extent over on the lakefront that was the owner made a decision to not renew leases, apparently plans to do renovations. And that building had a lot of very long-term tenants. So there are a lot of different things that we've been looking at, and we would like to get that back on track. We just need to figure out how much of that's going to be done through the subcommittee, or how much will come back to this committee. I think it's very important. And Michelle Gilbert, who is works for Lawyers Committee for Better Housing, was very involved with that too. Mark, I think she's your head person on that sort of work, right, Mark? And she's amazing. So, and they actually presented at council earlier this year about the Chilad and things like that, all of the ways to try to keep people. I do want to point out that one of the reasons that we did not spend our pay for direct services, legal and mediation in this past year was all of that was going to the Chilad, and Cook County was picking it up. So we got a really good deal there. So, and it really is an amazing service. And I think that we really have benefited a great deal from both MTO and Lawyers Committee for Better Housing expertise on all of this.
Great. Okay. Councilmember Burns has his hand up, and then we'll go back to Ugo.
Thank you, sir. Let me find my notes real quick. Sorry, just had it up. Is there any additional data on the categories? So in particular for maintenance, like what were the specific maintenance issues that led to these complaints?
I don't have any right offhand. I know certainly we're seeing more and more mold complaints. And I think that comes with, well, a little bit with heavier rainfall sometimes and things coming in to the buildings. And I think it's not only, I think it's a Midwest kind of a problem that's happening is, older buildings and heavier downpours, rain's getting, so we're getting more mold. I would say that's one of the things else. Otherwise, there's a lot of mixture of things, everything from, well, right now, heat not working so much to refrigerator, or a lot of appliances that don't work well. But if you, I could go back and see in the notes, in our notes, if there is further data on that, if you'd like.
John,
go ahead.
I was just wondering, John, do you think that some things might be during the pandemic? It was very difficult for landlords to do routine maintenance because, of course, we didn't want people working in other people's living space. So I think that there might have been some things from that. I certainly know that doing inspections was more challenging. We are back to doing all of our inspections in person, but at one point we were doing all of our inspections virtually. People were either sending pictures or waving a cell phone around and trying to look at it. So I think there might be some.
There might be some, but it's always been a one of the higher categories for calls. So.
And if you look at your data, it says that, it actually came down in October 20 to August 2021. So it probably was not COVID related, because August 2018 to October 2018 to August 2019, that's when you had the most calls for maintenance. But I have another question, and it is in regards to evictions. With the lifting of the moratorium on evictions, do you project that we're going to have a surge on evictions in Evanston, for one, and in the big Chicago metropolitan area? And have you started seeing any since I know that maybe in the months of winter, it's a little bit harder for landlords to think of doing evictions, but maybe filing. And I don't know if you have seen an uptick on those since the lifting of the moratorium.
Well, I'm going to let Mark mostly answer this, but certainly we've seen an uptick in actual eviction filings. Before people, like a year ago, it was all people worried about evictions and what am I going to do? How am I going to pay? And so that was getting them into the programs to help with the emergency rental assistance. But now that people are actually we're actually seeing actual evictions taking place. I don't know. I wouldn't go so far as to say that at least that we're going to be seeing this huge increase over what it was because of all the money that both the state, the county, and all that are poured into rental assistance. But I'm going to let Mark answer that because he's also dealing with a lot of the county stuff and knows what's happening there in other cities and that.
Well, I mean, and the different projections for all these eviction surges didn't look at, as John pointed out, rental assistance and all that. And we're not seeing nearly what we had expected to see. But at the same time, the early resolution program in court is feeling the heat. Everybody in court is like having a difficult time managing with what is coming. And I think that part of it is it's going to be, I think we're probably going to get up to a little higher than what is, what we had normally expected in terms of filings. I think they're about 35,000 in Cook, about 20,000 in Chicago. And I'd expect it's going to go a little, higher than that once things pick up again, but it's hard to do the same level of work remotely. And because we've actually added some additional process, due process rights that I think we should have had all along, things are going to be working a bit differently. So certainly the partners all are feeling the heat. There's a lot of pressure. And in fact, our early resolution attorneys are feeling there's a sense that people are burning out. And we've actually had to work with the early resolution program so that we can put our people on 50% and spread it out over our entire agency, just because it's so unpleasant to do these. It's just hard to work remotely. Specifically to Evanston, again, Evanston only has an average of 2 a week. We were trying to look at what it might look like to do a right to counsel. We're always fascinated by doing a right to counsel in a place where we work. So, even if you increased by 50%, I mean, it's still like 3 a week. So I think it's going to be, you'll be able to have a handle on it. I think it'll be manageable.
Councilmember Burns again.
I actually have quite a few things. So, so it would be helpful. I mean, this is the first committee, but it would be helpful to have some of that additional data. And based on your response, it seems like that might not be a part of the pick list in the CRM, which is typically what I see organizations running into. I'm a political consultant, so we use a lot of CRMs for our campaign management. And it's hard to really track kind of outcomes and call dispositions and some of this information if it's not a part of the pick list, if it's just in your notes, because then it's hard to generate those quick reports if you have to go back and scan through your notes just to get some of this data. But that's the type of data for sure that would be really helpful to understand, not just blanket maintenance, but what are the maintenance concerns, and then the next thing is what are the outcomes? What did that call lead to? Did it lead to repair? In a lot of cases in Evanston, there's let's say with the water damage example that you provided, scenario you provided, where there's cosmetic fixes, but then the underlying issue that's causing the water leak isn't repaired, and so it ends up happening again, and then you get another call. So trying to understand if that's happening, where it's happening, what are the outcomes? You know, that type of information is really important to understand the effectiveness of this agency's work. Not to say it's not working, but that's the type of data that I would personally want to see. And so again, just really have a good data and both outcome data and then data on what the specific issues are within each category. I'm also interested to know, does the city have access to the people who call in, or have we given that up in this contract? Do we know who is providing services being provided, which Evanston residents are being provided services from MTO?
Sarah?
We do not ask for that information directly. It really, one of the things is it could actually suppress people from calling sometimes if they think that everything they do is turned over to the government in some cases. We do have, there are times that John and his staff have worked very closely with our property maintenance people who are working on cases that have been referred to them too. And so it's, I think one of the things that we may want to do is remember that we can look at our, in many cases, if somebody has a complaint, they are directed to, of course, file for a contact 311 for a complaint inspection. And so we could perhaps look at the types of issues that are coming through that that tracking system rather than creating yet another one in John's database. I think that might be.
Well, it's important because we're, you know, if this was volunteer, it'd be one thing, but we're paying for the service. So I think it's important. But the reason why it's important for us to know who is being, well, one, I just want to respond to something. I don't think the city has a conflict because a lot of these calls are being generated from 311 requests. And so I don't think, doesn't seem at least, that people feel as though the city has some inherent conflict because they're calling us initially to seek some of these services, and then we're forwarding those calls along to MTO. But more so to the point that I made, the reason why that's important is I think one thing that's missing in this report is the tenant voice, right? Like, have we done any surveys to see how they're experiencing the service? Where's the survey, right? Like, that's like step one for me is let's send out a survey to the people that I've worked with. Now it's MTO, and I don't want to sound like I'm picking on MTO. Before it was Connections, now it's MTO. Maybe 10 years now from this is a different agency, but I'm just saying as a matter of process, we're missing that voice. And I think one of the ways we could get that voice without relying on MTO is to make sure we have a list of people that are being worked with so we can send out a notice, on a regular basis, not necessarily when a contract is coming up, but on a regular basis to get that feedback. Because I don't see that, in the report that I'm looking at. So that's something that's really necessary between now and certainly whenever this gets to council. I'd like to see where the community voice is represented in this. The next thing is.
I did want to add a couple things. One is that we are doing some follow-up surveys with people that do give us emails. I have to say it's not the highest response rate, but and secondly, that I think the issue that we run into all the time is people don't like to give up their address. If they think that we're going to be reporting it somewhere. So I think that's what we need to figure out how to do that, because people want to make sure that their landlord doesn't find out that they may be called, because there's still a fair amount of, there is retaliation that happens if landlords find out that the tenant called the city or did something, so I just think as we think about how to do this, that I would be cautious of, I just think we have to figure out how to do it well to make sure that the tenant is well protected and not going to face any consequences.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of that is kind of a public disclosure question too. If there's some things that our property standards department would have access to, but a landlord wouldn't, I think that would address some of the concerns. Because I'm certainly not suggesting that we should publish any of this information, but more so that it's available for our property standards department if they're the ones who end up sending out these surveys, which I do think those surveys should come from the city. Hey, you know, we're contracted with MTO. What has your experience been like, or whatever scientific, whatever the best scientific way is to conduct those surveys in the fairest, the most objective way. We should be, I think that should be coming from our property standards department. So that was one thing.
Councilmember Burns, I just want to say, and you know, MTO isn't in the same position that we're in because they have organizers, not attorneys. And I don't want to be, I don't want to be antagonistic in any way, but we also have to worry about the attorney-client privilege. And so for the particular cases that we take when we're working on contracts with government entities, we don't give the names, but we give. But you know, there are lots of proxy things we can do in terms of surveys and things. I don't want to say that it's not a good impulse to get that kind of feedback, but I have to work within that privilege, and I just want to make that statement clear.
Yeah, and but every case doesn't become one that is addressed by legal aid, the legal aid service, right? A lot of these complaints don't end up requiring a lawyer to be involved, right?
No, that's correct.
Most don't.
Yeah, okay. No, but I certainly understand, you know, attorney-client privilege, and I appreciate you elevating that point. And then, sorry, I'm jumping back between my notes. People calls in 2 days. So it says somewhere that if there's a message left, that if there's a voicemail left or someone calls on during non-business hours or organizational hours, that they'll get a call back in 2 days. Do you know where you're at on average? Are you? Is it like 2 days on average? Are you beating that? Are you a day? Do you have a sense of how you're doing on that, on getting back to folks who leave a message?
It depends on what time of the day they call, but usually next day, but sometimes 2 days.
Okay. I think I got a few more things.
I guess the other thing, that there is, we may get back to them, but we don't always get through to them either. I mean, people, they have to answer their phone.
Right, and that was actually the reason why I asked, because I get involved a lot in probably all of the issues that that your employees get involved in, just because it gets really heated. And in my experience, not only are most of these matters really urgent, but time is of the essence. Like sometimes if I get back to them in 2 days, I may have lost them, right? The landlord is already off trying to file something, or the tenant has sent another text to the landlord harassing them, or whatever it is. And so being able to get back to people quickly, I think in this particular work is really important. And I don't know if y'all would agree with that, but that certainly has been my experience.
Definitely.
And so whatever we can do to, whatever the city can do, you know, whether it's MTO, whoever it is down the road, or whoever we're working with, I think just trying to support the agency and helping to get those callback times down as quickly as possible, or even to pick up. Yeah, I don't know. So that's why I asked that. I need to think a bit more about that, but I appreciate that you agree that that's important. The next thing is the 2-hour trainings. Have you determined what topics, and almost more importantly, how do you determine, you know, the topics that you do? Is it pretty standard, or is it based on, you know, survey data, what you're hearing from the tenants, or how are those topics selected? And do you know what topics you would do going into 2022?
Well, one is we generally work with the staff at the department to kind of help figure things out, because I mean, we're all getting calls. We all kind of know a little bit what's going on. I think like the last ones were about, I mean, the last couple of years have really been focused on evictions. and what do you do both from a landlord and tenant perspective, and just the various programs that are out there, how to avoid eviction. So I think it does depend on like the environment at the time. You know, we try to tailor things because, you know, we want people to show up. You know, we don't want to be doing a training on security deposits when everybody's worried about evictions. So I think that that's what mostly, and then the other thing is then people ask questions, and oftentimes that's what we really like is when there are questions asked, and they can be about anything.
Councilmember Burns,
I think yes.
I just wanted to make a point that one of the things is during COVID, we've been doing online trainings, which is actually an interesting thing. In the past, both with open communities and with our own, when they were doing this, and then with when our property standards group has done its trainings, which are for landlords through the rent program, we'd found that we didn't get a whole lot of attendance a lot of times. And so one of the things that was very interesting is when we do recorded webinars, we have an opportunity to have dialogue with anyone who actually comes, but we also can then, we've posted things on our website, and we did that with our first webinars in the pandemic period were really what to do, how both landlords and tenants should try to work with each other. And I think that they actually had quite a positive impact. We were really trying to just help people figure out what to do. And we had both MTO staff and Lawyers Committee for Better Housing staff on that. So I think we need to, our plan is to meet with property standards and have a discussion and figure out what we think the topics are the most pertinent topics are.
Yeah, and I the only thing I'd add is I think that you know, obviously getting direct community feedback is great, but also I think the data that's collected can certainly point us in the right direction as to which topics to present around. But I think also something that would be concrete is to have specific, I want to say organizations, I guess, lined up. So I think was increasingly not effective, especially for this particular population that may have inflexible work schedules and just a lot going on, is to work with, you know, committees and, you know, that are made up of seniors and parents and some renters that are already assembling people, and then ask if you can present during those meetings for 30 minutes. So for example, you know, the Foster Senior Club, right? They're already, which is a senior organization in my ward, they're already meeting regularly, right? They've already bought into the fact that, look, I'm going to be here on this date at this time. And so if you reach out to that organization and said, hey, can we have 20 minutes every other this or quarterly or whatever it is to update the group about something to present on the topic, one, you would have a better sense of the audience and how many people are expected to attend. But I think that you'd make much greater impact, certainly in my community, the ward that I represent. And there's other groups too. We have a lot of different committees, some committees that are organized by city staff, others by, you know, organizations like Founding Focus and others. But there's already committees assembled. They've done the hard work of getting folks to buy into the importance of that group, you know, in whatever way. And so I would love to see that on paper to say, look, we're willing to line up, you know, 30-minute, 20-minute, whatever it is, presentations with existing committees or groups. So that's something I'd love to see as we move forward. And then the last thing is just trying to, well, two more things. So one is, I'm just trying to understand that the legal aid. So you haven't had to use that fund because of the grant from Cook County. Am I understanding that correctly?
Right.
If somebody needs those services?
Yes, in this case, that all of it went through the CHLAD, the Cook County Legal Help. I forget the whole name, and that
Cook County Housing and Debt Legal Aid. Wait, Cook County. Yeah. It's
But-
it's both
know what
debt
you
and housing services.
But basically, all legal aid support is charged by the hour, whatever that is. If somebody needs a lawyer essentially to get involved, that comes out of the fund. That's set aside.
If we have Lawyers Committee for Better Housing representing an Evanston resident, then that would be charged on an hourly basis for their work, yes.
Okay.
And with any indirect, and with any direct costs, like if they have filing things and stuff like that.
And it's not just around evictions. It could be
Oh.
any number of different.
Correct.
Okay.
It is not just around eviction.
And the last question is just based on your work. I can't recall how long you've been working with the city. I don't know if it's 2 years, 3 years. But do you have any policy recommendations for us? So is there, a friend of mine once said if nonprofits or something like that were working right, they put themselves out of business. But this idea that while we serve the day-to-day need, we always want to have a mind towards structural reforms that can make some of the things that lead somebody to call you occur less and less. And so I'm just wondering if your organization has any policy recommendations. What are things that we can change here in our city to, again, make these occurrences happen less and less? And you can think on that too. If there's nothing now, I'm not trying to, it's not that I got this question.
I could come up with several right away if you want to know.
Oh dear.
I'm very interested. You don't have to do it now, but I'm just saying, like, the next time we meet at council, before we, talk about this again, I'd love to know that either here or if the next meeting is a better place for it. I would absolutely want to know that. Yeah.
We can come up with some suggestions for you.
And actually, some of those recommendations were in how we should look at updating our landlord-tenant ordinance that I think are very important, because there are some things that we could definitely improve in our landlord-tenant ordinance. If nothing else, we haven't updated fees, any of the fines that people get, any of that sort of stuff. But there are significant changes that were made in the Cook County ordinance that I think really should be looked at. And that was largely John and Mark and their team's recommendations, because they know that through and through, because I think both of you worked with Cook County on developing theirs. So,
and just the peculiar one to Evanston is this no family, 3 unrelated people can't live. I mean, we do get quite a few inquiries about that.
Yeah, we're working on it. Very slow.
I just want to say, Sarah Flax is very forward-thinking in all of this, and we, you have a resident expert here with the city as well, so we'd be happy to talk to you through that. But we talked to Sarah, and she's, I think that she's really, I think she understands a lot of the issues, and maybe we can make some, where the city should make some reforms. She's great.
Well, yeah, well, it'd be great for us to have a list of things that we need to address in this area. That'd be great. Ugo, you have another question?
I do a couple of notes actually on what Council Member Burns was mentioning about quality control for another term of what he was talking. I think that it'd be a good idea, and I totally understand the concept of anonymity, remain anonymous for the participant in any of your calls or programs. But I think that maybe we can do an anonymous survey through a third party, and that not only with MTO, but across the board with any of the vendors that the city of Evanston uses, to make certain, because I see Council Members Burns' point that we need to be assured that the providers that we're using for the different services are doing what they're engaged to do, and in a way that is satisfactory to not only the city, but more importantly to the participants on those programs. So I think that it'll be welcomed by MTO and LCBH and everybody else. So I think that it'd be a good measure to take across the board. You also mentioned online training, and the problem with online training, what I find is that a lot of people have difficulty with technology. Is either because lack of resources or lack of understanding of how things work. And everybody's busy with their own world, regardless of what it is, either taking care of grandkids at home while the parents are at work, or whatever it is, or working and at the same time taking care of my side gig, which is a 2 or 3 unit building that I bought in Evanston. Whatever the case might be, it could be a challenge for people to do online training. And as it is to take time at 7 p.m. and come to a meeting for training anywhere. So there is always a challenge. And I think that we need to, try to find ways to reach as many people as possible with anything that we put forward with that. I think that MTO has an incredible history, and I am really impressed with the work that you guys do, and I'm willing to help in any way I can.
Okay. Maybe with that comment, we're ready to vote on the motion, or are there any further questions or discussion from the committee? Okay. Well, then the motion was made to recommend to City Council approval of funding for the renewal contract for landlord-tenant services with Metropolitan Tenants Organization and Lawyers Committee for Better Housing for January 1st, 2022 to December 31st, 2022. Could we have a roll call, please?
Yes. Monica Bobo,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Aye.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Lauren Berlin,
Aye.
Joanne Salome,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns,
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma,
Aye.
and Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you, committee, and thank you, John and Mark, for being with us this evening. And we will look forward to further discussion and interaction and information from you going forward.
Yes, that'll be great. And we'd love to talk about ways to modify things that could make things better for everyone.
Great. Okay. Well, we will be counting on you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we have another item for discussion, and I'm going to need a motion to get that before us to start talking about, and that's item 4B. So would someone make a motion on that item to recommend to City Council approval of funding of the renewal contract for the Community Partners for Affordable Housing to administer the inclusionary housing wait list?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
I second.
Okay, great. And now we're ready for a presentation and conversation.
Yes, and I will be presenting for a few minutes.
Okay.
We have Amy Kaufman, who's the Director of Development and Community Relation at Community Partners for Affordable Housing, that is there as well to answer any question after the presentation.
Mhm.
So what we're reviewing today is the request for funding for renewal of contract for 2022 for the administration of the inclusionary housing waitlist. SEPA has been working with us for a few years on this. They have experience in several other communities. I will start by saying that many developers that reach out to have a first meeting to talk about how they're going to be renting their affordable units are very, very thankful when they hear that they have helped to be able to fill this unit. They have a wait list, they have a third-party partner that they can rely on. And that's been something that's been very positive to get the process to work. What Community Partners for Affordable Housing is requested in the application is $43,000 for a 12 months contract. It's a little bit of an increase from the last contract, which was $40,000 for 20 months. And there's very specific reasons for that. One of the main reason is the fact that the service has been existing for a few years now, and so the wait list is growing. It's over 500 households. We also have more and more units, which is a good thing, but that requires more income certification. Also often requires more pre-application. We have more units coming on the market this year. And then on top of that, there's also the fact that we're gonna have SEPA help with compliance on 36 additional units that weren't necessarily part of the original IHO, but are also building that have affordable units. So they're going to do some compliance reviews on that this year. And that's 36 units is a good chunk of units. We have 9 new units that are coming in. And then the existing 40 units that they've been managing already from the last year. On top of that, it's been pretty apparent based on the invoices we've been receiving, and it's mentioned in the application that they're also not necessarily operating on their last contract. Well, they were essentially operating a little bit of a loss. So they needed to make sure they were accounting for actual cost of the service. I have some additional information. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a second, and we can review the general report for the wait list for the year 2021. Can anybody see my screen?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
We can.
Is it big enough? Do you want me to zoom in a little bit?
I would zoom in, please. Maybe even one more. Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is a report that we put together based on SEPA's information and feedback. We do this twice a year to provide an update in July and January. So you can see information that is compiled as far as how many units total are on the wait list currently by income level, as well as see how much household have been added since the last time we did the report. Here we can see there's 66 new household that were added to the wait list. That is on par with the seasonal pattern. We had about the same amount last year. We have 559 household on the wait list. The local Evanston household are about 161, and we can see that the bulk is under 50% of AMI for those households. On the second chart, you can see the split of those same household on the wait list, but by number of people in the household and by income level as well. And in that case, you can see that as a percentage to the total, and you can see that the bulk of the household on the wait list currently, and that's been a pattern since the beginning. We have about 75% of the household on the wait list that are either 1 or 2 people households. That's one thing for the report. We also usually provide information on the number of units and how they're split by size and by income level and divided between existing units, which means the units that we've already rented up and the units that are in the process of being rented up. This time for the report, you don't have a ton of information in the existing units in the process of being rented up due to the market timing. There wasn't really any unit that was being rented. Everything has been taken care of. So we have the 40 units split by size and income level. Usually you have a little bit more information there. And then usually we also try to track the qualification process for the buildings that are in the process of being rented. Again, I crossed out the Albion and Avador because they're fully rented up by now. And I've added the future 2022 buildings that will bring new units, but right now there's no information because that process has not started yet. And then the last couple chart is just a summary of all the different IHO units by income level. And then at the bottom, you just have for reference what's coming up in the pipeline. You can see we have quite a few units coming up in 2022 and later. A lot of those are actually going to come later than 2022. So the bulk of that is not necessarily going to happen in 22, at least for renting up. As far as the contract, I think I have covered most of what we were hoping to cover, but if you have any question or would like to ask question to Amy, she's joining the call right now.
Hi, everybody.
Okay, well, thank you. Committee, any questions, or would you like to hear from Amy about anything, or? Gosh. Well, I'll have a question about the funding, because both this program and the first program that we talked about are drawing from our Affordable Housing Fund. And I was really surprised to see that the balance is 2.6 million in our Affordable Housing Fund. Is that truly sitting there just waiting to be spent, or is that any of that going to that Evergreen project, or?
We have one payment left for Evergreen. We have, and that we are expecting to take most of, if not all of, out of our home program, because we have paid $1.5 million out of our Affordable Housing Fund so far, and we have paid all but the last 200,000, which is the holding until the final, till the first temporary certificate of occupancy is, because that's so we, in this case, we usually try to use the most restrictive money first when we can. And as some of you may remember, we had that interesting challenge of not having our 2021 home grant amount known. And so what we did is we had a total funding allocation of 2 million, with the plan of making 500,000 from home and the rest from the Affordable Housing Fund. But we had a very complicated series of documents to which did not make the bankers happy. It's like, well, we'll do it either this way or that way, but we did work it out. But so a lot of the money we have is still, because we had the big payout from the link a number of years ago, but we also had a $575,000 contribution because 1555 Ridge only put half of its units on site, so they paid a fee in lieu. So we have more than, you know, it seems like a lot, but it is not necessarily going to refresh. And that's one of our big challenges.
Right, great, thank you. Kathy, you have a question?
Sorry, I was still muted. Not really a question. I mean, I want to thank SEPA for the work they do. I agree with what Marion said, that having these folks able to maintain that wait list and do a lot of the paperwork helps ease the transition for some of these developers who may not understand nuances of how to do that. What I actually was hoping to hear, just because I think it's so interesting, is a lot of times, and you saw it on the chart, when folks on the wait list are offered a unit and they turn it down, and just to better understand the reasons why that sometimes happens.
That's a great question. It's pretty consistent. I'll tell you, the reason that generally people turn down units has to do with square footage relative to rent. Sometimes it's just plain out rent, whether they may have cleared the hurdle, the housing payment ratio, and they may have been approved, but they may not want to spend that much on their rent. But very often some of the affordable units they're small, the square footage is small, and the relationship between the square footage and the rent is a thing that we have heard consistently. We don't always know. Sometimes people just don't tell us, but the feedback we've gotten, that is the primary reason. And I have to say, Sarah and Marion have been, and hopefully now Anna, have been tremendous partners as we work with the developers to try and find that sweet spot to try and minimize those kinds of things. A lot of that has to happen before the developer agreement is signed and at the beginning, and have them have an understanding, because we have a lot of experience now. We do see patterns, and sharing the pattern can help them understand about you know, maybe it's better to price it a little lower if the square footage is going to be, you know, 550 square feet. And so that helps. And actually think we're a good team. I think we cover a lot of bases with the developers, with the assistance of city staff. I think most of those meetings are extremely productive. But the developers are well aware going into this that is an issue. We don't hide it. We just share with them what the experience is and sort of what the behavior patterns are.
Yeah, that's helpful. Councilmember Burns, you have a question?
Yeah, first question, kind of picking off that last one is, you know, we've heard from community members about an interest in seeing more in just larger units with more bedrooms. I think a lot of these are either studios or one bedrooms. In this program, do you think what you just mentioned, you know, aligns with what we're hearing from the community in that respect?
I think it's, in a way, this is the lawyer in me, it's two separate things. I think if you want larger units in terms of number of bedrooms, that's something different from sort of the square foot allotment for a 1 bedroom or the square foot allotment for a 2 bedroom. When you can look at the waiting list and you can see that many on the, I think, Marion, you said 75% are 1 and 2 person households. Now, I will tell you that waiting lists tend to go the way of inventory. So if you had more 3-bedroom units, you would have more you would have more families that need a 3-bedroom household or households that need a 3-bedroom household on your waiting list. We notice that in every program. So it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, so I wouldn't take that to the bank. But yeah, I think having larger units with more bedrooms in it is something, you know, to the question for the previous presenter about the kinds of things that you can do that can sort of get to the root of what you're trying to fix here. Certainly units that service larger household size would be one of them. And then another one would be sort of average square foot per unit would be another one. You know, the city does a dance with the developers. We do too with, you know, we don't tell them how to develop their building. And, you know, they comply with the ordinance and, you know, they have to make those decisions as long as they're sort of in those parameters. We defer to the city and the city, you know, makes those, has those discussions and negotiations with the developers. But I think both of those things would be things to keep your eye on.
One of the things we are talking about, because this is the year we are looking at our inclusionary housing ordinance to see what changes we ought to consider. And one of the things is looking at ways to more effectively incentivize large units. Larger bedroom, more units with more bedrooms. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges that you run into is pushing greater square footage. And this is what Amy was talking about, you know, development is very, very expensive, and developers make their best money for the most part, unless you're in a totally different part of the market, like those people who are doing, you know, 3-floor condominiums in downtown Chicago, which we're not quite that market, is smaller units and more efficient sizes. Another thing, and we've talked about this, Amy, I don't know how true it is, but I think there is some truth. People who have more disposable income sometimes don't care as much about hanging on to things that they might want, you know, because they can always replace it. And that is something we've had some discussions with people. Well, I need to hang on to this because, you know, I may need it at some other time. And that's just a difference in people who are trying to be a little more thoughtful about what they might not be able to afford if they let go of something. So
I 100% agree. Actually, that's another thing we see across programs.
So we'll look at how we can incentivize different sizes of units. But
and Sarah, I guess more specifically to what we heard there from Amy is, you know, if we know downtown, most of the units in the program will be studios and 1-bedrooms. Is there any way to, you know, I hate requiring things if you have to, but like if we know it's not matching up, that even the people that are looking, even the people that are looking for studios and 1-bedrooms, like they're not able to to make sense of the price downtown? Like, what do we need to adjust to make sure it's serving the Evanston population that is looking for those units downtown? Is it adjusting? I know we ran 80% AMI on a lot of those. Is that where we need to make the
No.
adjustments?
We've already made that adjustment. Most of the 80% units were from the prior version of the IHO.
Okay.
Right now, we are putting it at 60% because that is what our current ordinance calls for. However, developers can offer different income mixes, but they can't be above 80% and be counted against the inclusionary requirement. And I will tell you that very few market rate developers will do 30% units. So you can pretty much, Kathy will support me on that. But we are using that 60% because the 80% can be the hardest ones to fill, because the 80% people at that income have more options.
Right.
And so the reality is almost anybody nowadays living in TOD areas in new construction, you're not going to be getting people building large units in that situation for market rate or affordable in most cases. And I guess we all have to think about sustainability and climate action, that we all have to learn to live in more modest spaces in some cases. But
I just want to pile on to Sarah, because she's spot on about the 60%. And that is something that is not in every inclusionary ordinance across the area. And it is those lower income tiers that need the bulk of the units. She's right. As you get up to 80%, there's even ownership opportunities, affordable ownership opportunities at 80%. It's really the 60% population, and some ordinances skew to sort of distribute it evenly. Some will go all the way up to 120%. So we really applaud Evanston's efforts to shift those units down to the lower end of the AMIs. It's effective. It's why you have part of the reason you have a 0% vacancy. You have 0 vacancies right now in your inclusionary units. That's incredible. So, that's part of the reason.
I brought up the 80% or the AMI because I think, it could correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, when we first started the program, a lot of the units were at that 80%, if I recall correctly. And so I am glad that we've adjusted that down to 60%. Amy, have we, this concern about square footage and price not perfectly matching up, has that improved since we've gone to 60%? Is most of that concern when we were at 80%, or is it still an issue that you're hearing?
It's still an issue. And what happens is, as Sarah and Marion can, fill you in, there's a range of rents that if you're going to try and rent a unit that's small, then, don't push it all the way up to the end of the range that you can pick for your rent. Come down a little bit on rent. Then people see it differently if the rent is lower. So the square footage, really, that is a discussion between the city and the developer at the outset, because there's nothing you can do about that in hindsight. The only thing you can do in hindsight, if you're seeing those patterns, is to bring that rent down. And some of them don't, they don't want we all want the same thing. We all want to lease those units. I really do feel like we're all on the same team. And some of them do listen. Some of them will hang on to a unit for a little bit longer than, might be ideal from our perspective, but eventually they get to where they need to go, or somebody comes along who's willing to lease it. But, the square footage has to be dealt with on the front end. The rent is something that you can work with the developer, even as, the experience goes along. The other thing is, for those of you who've ever done any kind of income certification, the higher the rent is, the narrower the little slice of the pie is that somebody's income can be, because they have to have enough income to be able to afford the rent, and not too much. So if you make it too narrow, it's going to take longer to lease a unit. Obviously, we're not having trouble leasing units. Like I said, you've got 0 vacancies. But that's another thing that we try and educate developers on.
Another point I want to make is that once we get people in, they stay.
Yeah,
828 noise, which was the first officially in the inclusionary housing ordinance, not the first affordable units we had in market rate, but through the ordinance. And we've had one turnover, I think.
no, it didn't turn over. They
It
actually
didn't.
worked it out with that tenant. Yep.
They worked it out with that tenant.
They
So
did.
that building first went into leased up in 2018.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that gives you, and that's something that the developers really like, working with SEPA and having the support system too, because we're trying to make it a stable place for the tenants to be, but also to create stable tenants for the property owners, because the last thing they want is churn.
Yeah.
It doesn't do them any good, and it doesn't do our lower income households any good if we get them in someplace and then, you know, in a short period of time, they're out. In fact, we're, that's one of the things that's quite different about our, the way our ordinance works. They come in at 60%, they can stay at that 60% rent until they hit the median, till they hit 100% AMI. And then they can get one more year before they have to go find market rate housing for themselves. And, you know, we're really trying to provide stable housing. We don't want churn. That is not good for anybody.
Right, great.
A couple more questions. So do we have a sense, Amy or Sarah, like what the ideal square footage would be in a studio and
No.
one bedroom that would make
No.
things better, or no?
You know, I'm not going to touch that. Developers know what they can rent. And, you know, we can all hear about what people don't like, but what we don't hear is that the people who rent right away and are happy. So I think we have to be careful about trying to decide what kind of pressure we should put on developers to the literal size. I think that what we will work on is larger units in terms of bedroom sizes. And we do, I mean, I worked on one project that didn't actually go through. It was going to be an addition to an existing building, and they wanted to put in these, they were going to be 2-bedroom units, but the bedrooms were both really, really small. And I said, you got to understand, those bedrooms are under 100 square feet. Each one of them will only have one person from our occupancy standards. So don't think you could have up to 4 people in there legally. So we have to watch that sort of thing too.
And real quick, I'm already this, you know, and I apologize to everybody else. I know these questions are eliciting or motivating a lot of discussions. I'm sorry, but I want to get through the questions real quick because I don't want to take up too much more time.
Sure.
But what's important about that to note is, and I brought this up in the last call, data is really important because data allows us to understand what the problems are and whether we solve the problem downtown, right, in an inclusionary housing unit, or we do it in one of our neighborhoods. It's still good to know what people are looking for. And so I want to be clear here. I'm not saying that the developers downtown need to solve that problem, but it would be really helpful for us on the council to know what people are looking for, especially if it's a you know, it's a significant group that is looking for something in a 1-bedroom and studio that the market is not currently offering. It would be great for us to know that. And that's why I asked that question. And so moving forward, if we can try to track that or try to get our head around that, however we can, that certainly would be beneficial to me. Another question is, how is the list being maintained and updated and scrubbed so that people aren't on the list for longer than they should, and other people are missing opportunities because of it? How is the list maintained, updated, scrubbed?
So the list is updated annually, and they just did it like in the last 6 weeks. Everybody got a waitlist update. It wasn't done during COVID because so many people were not living at their regular addresses. But we just did the waitlist update, and they are just going through the process of matching up who responded, who didn't respond. Everybody gets a few chances to respond. If they don't respond after several attempts, they come off the waiting list. We keep excellent records. If there's a mistake, we know where the person was, what date they were taken off. And if something comes up that they actually did respond or we didn't know, we have a way to put somebody back on. But for the most part, our records are pretty good. And when people don't respond. That 550 something number, that's going to come down with this next wait list update. I would be surprised if fewer than 100 people came off. But, you know, over the course of the next year with these 9 units coming up and the turnovers that we'll have now that there are so many units, that list is going to build up again. And then you do your wait list update and it comes down a little bit again. People who don't respond to when there is a unit available, when we send out full applications to people who could qualify, if they don't respond to the outreach, they just stay in their spot. We don't consider that a pass on a unit. So we do not take those people off the list. So somebody could theoretically answer that wait list update every year and stay on the list for quite a while if there wasn't something that matched up with their needs, or, you know, there wasn't availability of something that they wanted or were a good fit for.
And this probably is the last question. So are we seeing with the studios and 1 bedrooms that it's 1 adult mostly?
Yeah, with studios and 1 bedrooms, it's what?
Is it 1 adult?
Well, we try for 2 in the 1 bedrooms. Studios,
Okay.
yes, would be 1, but for the 1 bedrooms, we would try as hard as we could to put 2 people in. We try very hard not to underutilize these apartments, and so
And I asked that question more from the income eligibility side of things. Are we saying that 2 people just can't meet the, you know, that they're a few dollars or whatever it is over the income that they do to qualify?
No.
We're not saying that? Okay.
No, not really. No, because, you know, a lot of them will be 1 wage earner in a 2-person household. It's not always 2 wage earners. So no, that's not generally an issue.
That's correct.
The
Okay.
rents are pretty well established so that a 1 bedroom can be afforded by a single person. They've got to be toward the higher income of that level to afford a 1 bedroom by themselves, but it is possible. But Amy's absolutely right. These are the posted rents by HUD and the Illinois Housing Development Authority. And so we want to, you know, it's not, I mean, we've had people say, well, I know people who need a 2 bedroom just for themselves. And it's, you know, it's like, that's not going to be very likely. You know, that's really not what we can do in an affordable housing program for the most part.
Right. It's the ideal is, and a lot of these projections and estimations are based on bedroom plus 1. So if you had a 2 bedroom,
And
you
I
would
brought
want at
that up
least
because
3 people.
I brought that up only because with we're working on a project on Church and Darrow, a much bigger project with 60% or below, and at least the numbers I'm looking at, it seems like it would somewhat discriminate against 2, you know, wage earner, as you put it, households, which is just something good to know, because I feel like it may say, okay, yeah, this is for families, but is it for families, you know, with children and 1 wage earner, or are we also creating housing for 2 wage earners who still may be, you know, not making a ton of money, and so they would benefit from an affordable housing program, but are we somehow cutting them out? So it's just an interesting thing to look at. So that's why I asked. But
I will tell you, Council Member Burns, that we've seen the answer to that question would be yes, yes, and yes. There's plenty of 2 wage earners who can qualify for a 60% unit. That happens all the time. There's plenty of single wage earners with a child or 2 children, or, you know, retired parents who live with them, or whatever the situation is. I think there's something for everyone. Everybody's needs are a little bit different. Everybody's income comes together a little bit differently. I think it's very difficult to sort of say, you know, a 1 bedroom would be for this kind of household, or this many wage earners, and a 2 bedroom, because it really is all over the map. And that's one of the beautiful things about using gross household income as the level of determining, because it is a level playing field. It's just about the only number that's a level playing field. And how those numbers break down depends on the individual household. And, you know, don't forget, some people have wages, some people have disability, some people have Social Security, some, you know, people have child support, maintenance. There's all different kinds of income. It all counts as income, which is good. It helps people qualify. It helps them be able to afford apartments for the most part.
Right. Amy, thank you so much. And Chair, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Amy and Sarah.
Welcome.
Okay, Ugo, you had your hand up at one point. Do you still have a question or?
I don't know if I can remember him, but I'll try. Let me see here. Is there a limit to the wait list? How many people could be on the wait list, or it's just as many as could come?
Such a good question, because there are lots of organizations that limit their wait lists.
Right.
Very many years ago, we decided that we were not going to do that. And the reason we don't like to do that is because during the course of that wait list, people's lives change so much, and they're involved in a lease, and their household size changes, and their income changes, and they move, that, you know, you need a robust wait list to fill your units. Again, you have 0 vacancies. Sometimes you have to go very far down the wait list to find the match. You don't like walk up to the deli and order the unit you want, right? You don't get to say, I'm next, I'll take a 2-bedroom in the center of town for $1,000. It's not the way it works. So we have to go down the waiting list. Okay, let's say we have a 1-bedroom. You're not going to send the information about a 1-bedroom to a household of 4, right? So you, and then if it's for below 60 and the household of, 2 is making $85,000, they're not going to qualify for the. So, you have to go down the list to find that right match. So both because we don't think it's right, everybody should be able to, just as a, to our mission, we would rather not close the wait list, but also because it's effective property management to have a lot of people on the wait list, because and you guys with these big developments, you got a lot of units that come up at once. Those are a lot of units to fill. We really like having a robust waiting list.
That's very good. And, with the turnover being so little, which is totally understandable when you have a rent that is below market significantly, like in cities where they had rent freezes, they were not having the turnover on those apartments that were under those restrictions. So which made it a little bit more difficult for landlords in those cities. But here's a different story, and I'm glad we have those units, but the turnover is almost non-existent for as far as your program is concerned. So we're relying only on new units that come onto the list of available units for your program, for the SEPA program. And I'm glad to know that you maintain such a good quality of overseeing who qualifies out of the waiting list and who stays on that waiting list over the years. So it's very good. But, I'm with Mr. Burns on the issue of, and you mentioned it, Ms. Kaufman, that whatever you have, that's kind of the market that is created around that type of units. I understand that, but with so many families wanting to stay in Evanston and they find it unaffordable, I see it constantly that families that are currently in Evanston, they cannot afford to make the move, and their building just sold. Their small multi-unit building just sold for a much higher price than the previous owner had paid for it. So the rents naturally have to go up for the new landlord to make that a viable business. So how do we, and I know this conversation has been around that topic, how do we create that? Is there any way that we can say if a developer has a 10% responsibility to the inclusionary apartments, can we ask them to make that 10% mostly what we don't have on the market, that we know there is a demand for 2 and 3 bedrooms mainly, or namely. So I think that would be probably a different approach to take onto that if the city has that kind of leverage with developers, and we might not.
Ugo, that's something that we need to discuss more, and we'll come back to the committee about potential changes to the inclusionary housing ordinance, because I do think there are ways we can try to incentivize larger units, but understand that in certain places, they're just not going to build them, but they may be able to build them in other parts of town. And one of the other interesting things that we heard, of course, a great deal when, especially when Albion and Avidor were first proposed and people were fighting, it's like, well, families wouldn't want to live in high rises downtown. I mean, so, you know, what happens is we hear if somebody wanted to build those, that would be fine. We would, I'm sure, be able to rent them up. But what I think we will see is maybe some things like in 1555 Ridge, for example, even though we're getting only 3 units, 2 of them are 2 bedrooms and 1 is a 1 bedroom. So it's kind of a different building. You know, it's not right downtown. And so they're making somewhat larger units. I think there's also an opportunity, and this is something that hopefully will work with CIC, because CIC has this wonderful loan program for people who acquire and are rehabbing existing buildings, and they can get below market rate financing from CIC if they have a minimum of 20% of their units affordable at 50% of area median, right? Kathy, is that still what it is right now?
I hate to tell you that I don't work at CIC anymore, but
but that sounds close,
talk
right?
about offline, but you're right.
But and the other thing that is happening, and we are just starting to try to figure out how we can leverage it, is the state at the end of the their last fiscal year approved a program that would provide property tax relief in the form of tax credits for developments that have 20% or more of their housing affordable to households at or below 60% of the area median. And so that is but you have to have at least a 7-unit building to be able to qualify for it. So it's kind of like the class 9 tax relief program from that standpoint. But these are the things that we are looking at and trying to figure out how we can get more units and different types of units.
Can I just add to something that Councilmember Burns said and Mr. Rodriguez said? You know, when we give feedback on like why people turned a unit down, it is a really small sample. I mean, it is really not a lot of people. There are only 24 people or something like that who turned units down in total. And, we don't get 100% feedback from people. So, if you really want to understand what people want, I think you have to look, you need a much bigger sample than that. And then the other point that I just wanted to come back to quickly was, on this conversation about square footage versus rent, from our perspective, I don't know what kind of leverage the city has on square footage, but rent is, the square footage looks a lot better to people when the rent comes down a little bit. So there's an easy way to keep that unit and work with the developer to try and find a rent that, and it is something that can evolve over time. If we've seen 3 or 4 or 5 people walk away, we tell the developer and talk to Sarah and talk to Marion and, try and nudge them to take the rent down a little bit. In almost every case, when they start to take the rent down, they find the spot that they're able to lease that unit, even though it's small. So it's not always just the square footage. It's not that they see the square footage and they walk away. It's the square footage relative to the rent.
All right, great. Okay.
I just want to quickly say, I think actually Evanston is small enough where 24, what the needs of 24 people actually does mean a lot. I think about this is a different thing, but District 65 just released a survey citywide to help inform student assignment. And I want to say one of the responses, it was about only 30 people who responded to certain questions. And so I just want to just put that out there, that 24 in a place like Evanston, I mean, that means something, particularly that it says what people possibly are looking for downtown. It says what they're looking for along the rail line, where I think most of these units are. So it says something. I think there is some value to knowing why those folks are being turned away and what we can do to serve their needs.
But I think what we would have to look at then is how many people didn't even look at the unit, but who might have been on the list because they were in the middle of a lease or various other things like that. So, you know, it really is
A lot of different reasons.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
and
those 24, I totally hear what you're saying, but those 24 were not all, we don't have information from all, so it's not anywhere close to
Yes.
24. It's
Okay.
a subset of that, but that's okay. I
Okay.
hear your point. I understand.
And I guess university, and this is to Sarah, that I think we really need to, and we talked about this in the social service committee, working with our agencies, finding a speaker that has an expertise in CRMs, and just seeing if there's a way that we can support our agencies in updating how they collect data, because it really is a task to get some of this information. If you have to like put it in one-on-one or one by one, or if you're trying to take what you capture in notes and then put it into a spreadsheet. But it really is about, capturing this data at the moment in which you're talking to the person, so that you're able to quickly, with a couple presses of a button, generate reports with really rich data. And I think that's maybe something that's useful for the agencies that we're working with on this committee as well, as just a separate note, but we can talk about that offline.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, thank you for the robust discussion on this item as well. And we're getting close to our adjournment time. So if there are no more questions, then let's vote on the motion to recommend to the City Council approval of funding for the renewal contract for community partners for affordable housing to administer the inclusionary housing wait list. And that's ready for us to take a roll call.
Monica Bogo,
Aye.
Kathy Feingold,
Hi.
Hugo Rodriguez,
Aye.
Joanne Sullivan,
Aye.
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma
Aye.
and Chair Ravel.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Great. Well,
Thank you, everybody. We
Thank
really
you.
appreciate the partnership. It's
Yeah.
a real highlight. We really do enjoy it.
Well, thank you for the amazing waitlist monitor. Yeah, so thank you. Okay.
Thank you, guys. Okay.
Thank you.
So Marion, do we have anybody at this late hour who wants to give public comment?
We do. We did not have anybody sign up in advance for public comment. However, I have one person with a raised hand, and I believe Sue Lolbeck as well was intending to provide comments that she provided in the Q&A box, but may provide as well verbally. So I'm going to allow T. I'm not sure who that is. I don't have a full name, to talk and provide comment.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can,
Hi.
Tina.
Okay, this is Tina Payton. Happy New Year, everyone.
Thank you.
So I had a couple of comments. Kind of what committee member Rodriguez was saying about the Housing Authority of Cook County, or the Section 8 voucher. The law doesn't really matter. And the reason I say that is because there's a chart, which is 30% AMI. And if the landlord sees the chart, in order to get around that, all you need to do is raise your rent higher than the chart, and it doesn't apply. I live in between two buildings that were just sold. One, the Reserve, for $65 million, and one block down at 1717 Ridge was just sold for $71 million. These buildings are not taking any affordable units for 30% AMI, which is the Section 8 voucher. So you're just talking to SEPA and the buildings that you're discussing, and according to the chart, you will see that most of the people on these in these inclusionary housing vouchers are 50 to 60% AMI. So there's no incentive to take the Section 8 voucher or any programs. TBRA is 30% AMI. The rapid rehousing is 30% AMI, which I take, by the way. And we have no help for the landlord. And Ms. Flax, thank you so much for including in the ARPA fund proposal for help for small landlords. I've been on here for many years asking for help for small landlords. We were hit severely with COVID and the eviction moratorium and have been ignored. And I'm just giving you all a warning that this is very serious because landlords, small landlords, took the biggest hit. And as you know, what I just told you about these expensive buildings, they're not taking these rents, or the people that are paying these low amounts, so they're not interested. Buildings are being bought up by big corporations, and soon you will have no small landlords to put these people in. I will also say that you will know, for Councilmember Burns, you will know who called for a repair for the apartment if it is in the tenant's apartment. So a lot of times I would know that if a tenant called because a repair will be in their apartment. I feel like something that the city needs to work on is communication with the landlord. Oftentimes a tenant will call and it's one-sided. You just do whatever the tenant says with no correspondence with the landlord. It's very important that you get the landlord's side. Sometimes a tenant will call the city maintenance or the inspections department, and they'll never call me one time, and I have no idea what's going on. So we need to work on that. I hope that this year that you will do that. Also, evictions will go up. Right now, during the holidays, evictions were paused for the holiday. And also when the weather is below 32 degrees, they will not do evictions. You will see evictions go up higher when it gets a little warmer towards the spring. So it's very important. You all will come up with a lot of new laws. There's a lot of new laws coming up nationwide that I believe will be mandated across the board. And there needs to be some communications with the landlord. You're making new laws and ordinance here citywide. We need to be asked to, how is this going to affect us? Because you want us to provide affordable housing, but this is not going well. This eviction moratorium has been going on for a year and a half, almost 2 years, that the eviction moratorium, and I believe they're going to try to bring it back. You're going to scare away a lot of small landlords. It's already happened. A lot of buildings are being sold nationwide because we are being ignored. A lot of landlords have been owed $10,000 or more dollars, and the people can just walk away and no assistance from anyone. It's a bad deal. We are a business and we would like to see a profit too. We see that the restaurant has been helped and the stores have been helped and all other kind of retails. People do not buy real estate and rent it out to lose money. And this is what's happened in the last 2 years. So I'm asking for the council member people that are on the line right now, when it comes up for ARPA money for small landlords, I strongly suggest that you vote yes, because you're going to have a large problem with affordable housing if not. Thank you, and Black Lives Matter.
Thank you. And we will be taking up the small landlord issue on this committee soon. So Marion, it's DeSulo. Okay, there's Sue. Go ahead.
Hi, I didn't really have a comment. I just interjected during your conversation earlier that Connections gets calls from, probably 100 people a week, and at least half of those are in households that only have 1 or 2 people. And so while we do hear from a lot of people in the community that we really need to be focusing on housing for families, I think some of that comes from the fact that so much of the housing that has been built is smaller units, that it feels like there's a greater shortage of family units, but really we really need all different sizes. So I was just have a hard time staying quiet during the conversation, so I put a little chat in there. So that's all.
Yeah, that's important information. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. All righty. Sarah, in like 1 or 2 minutes, a preview of what's coming next for this committee, and then we can adjourn our meeting.
Okay, there are 3 things that I want to bring up. First of all, we are working on the Consolidated Annual Performance and Evaluation Report, that exciting report that we do to HUD. So you can expect to have that on the March agenda. It will be the closing of the public comment period. The public comment period will open on the 1st of March. It's a 15-day public comment period, and we have to get the caper to HUD by the 31st. More exciting, and I think more interesting. Absolutely, there are 2 that are 2 items that we don't know exactly when we'll bring conclusions to the committee, but one of which is small landlords that I have been in discussion with Councilmember Burns separately, that he and I have talked about the importance of convening a working group and having meetings with our small landlords to craft a program that's going to be something that's going to help them. And so we know we're pulling together names, but what I would really like us to do is form a working group that can meet with some of our landlords in the 5th ward and the 8th ward, especially, I think, are areas, but we're not restricting it to that. We're really looking at our small local landlords who are providing the kind of housing that Tina was just talking about. And so that's one thing. The other thing is we are Kara Pratt, of course, and we are working on the retrofit program for it might work for rental, might work and home ownership, but again, focusing on what can we do to improve the quality of our lower income housing, whether it's ownership or rental. And that's the possible multi-source stuff that we've talked about with weatherization and all that stuff. We need to do a little more work on that before we come back to the committee. But these are things that are going to progress. I would really like to get the small landlords thing moving very quickly. I agree with Tina. One of the threats is we can lose our small landlords that are both businesses and, longtime members of our community.
Right. Great. Okay. Well, I know the committee will be eager to sink their teeth into that one.
If anybody is interested in being on a working group, I guess, please let me know. We're trying to keep it to 2 or fewer committee members, so we don't have to do open meetings acts and all that stuff. But
Chair, and if I can say one quick thing.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say specifically for Ms. Payton, because she's here, but also I think this is just a statement for the broader community that a lot of times the issues that that the community brings us, we're working on it. and I've talked to Ms. Payton about this and others who share her concern that I've never heard any council member disagree with or staff disagree with the fact we need to support small to mid-sized landlords. And I think the first time you brought it up when I was on council, probably the very next week I was having conversations with Sarah about it. And so I think it takes time. We got to go through, subcommittees and committees, and eventually things make it to council. But I just want you to know that we never disagreed, that it was always our intention to find a way to support landlords who are providing naturally, current affordable housing. And, but as I think, good advocates and activists need to do, you continue to advocate until it's done. So also understand why you continue to, join our meetings. And, but I just want you to know, I just want to speak directly to you. I have always taken that concern seriously. And I think this committee has and council members have as well. And so whether you continue to want to speak during public comment, I would encourage you to do so. But just speaking directly to you, I want you to know we have always taken that concern seriously. And that is all. Thank you, Chair.
All right. Yeah, no, I think we all agree. All right. Then if there's no more business to come before the committee, I declare this meeting adjourned, and we'll look forward to seeing you February 15th for the next meaty discussion. So thank you all very much for this evening's conversation.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everybody.
everybody.
Good night.
Sarah, can you stay on real quick? I just had a quick thing I wanted to say. Thanks.
I can't keep the webinar on for just a couple people. You may need to reconnect separately.
Don't worry, Sarah, I'll call you.
Okay.
I'll call you.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
All righty.
Is it Anna or Anna? I'm sorry, is it Anna?
It's Anna. Yeah.
Anna, welcome, congratulations, and looking forward to working with you.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Have a wonderful night.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Marion.
All righty.